Hello and welcome to Dig It. I'm Peter Brown and hosting the show with me today is Chris Day. Hi Chris.
Hi Peter. Today on Dig It we're delighted to be able to talk to Hugh Richards. Hugh documents his garden on YouTube. His most popular videos have had over 4 million hits. He's just published a new book with Sam Cooper, the Self-Sufficiency Garden book, actually a #1 Sunday Times bestseller no less. Hugh, a very warm welcome to Dig It, and where do we find you on this lovely May day?
Well, yeah, it's May. It's my favourite month of the year, and I don't have signal at the garden, so I've had to come back to my flat to speak to you guys.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah, Hugh, it's always a busy month, May, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and I mean it's beautiful. I live on the coast in Midwest Wales, a town called Aberystwyth, and it's really nice. But my favourite thing about May is going out into the countryside, and all of the hedgerows are just filled with wild flowers.
Yeah, it's certainly driving. Well, I was in Abergavenny at the weekend, not far from you, and you certainly do notice the flowers are all out now, but equally the difference in timings, because down in Somerset where I was on Saturday, certain things are more advanced than we've got here, and certain things are less advanced, and you always think, well, snowdrops are finished up this way, whereas where I was in Somerset, they were still out, and really? I was like, wow, okay, it must have been a cold glen area down there. But anyway,
well, it's funny. Abergavenny is actually a really nice growing climate compared to mine. It's actually, if people think it's close, it's over 2 hours away by car, so it's not actually that close. And I was in Lincolnshire last weekend, and all of the hawthorns are flowering. And my hawthorn here I can't even see the flower buds. So really? Yeah, it's quite nice how everything's different.
Without a doubt. So what got you into gardening, and where did your passion for growing come from?
I have to blame my dad, to be honest. It's his fault. He got me into it. And look where I've ended up now. So thanks a lot, Dad. But I grew up on a small holding, and it was I just thought everyone gardened. I started when I was 3. There's a photo of me in a red onesie, and I was just kind of looking a little bit perplexed, staring at a raised bed. And little did I know at that moment how important raised beds and gardening would be for me. But my dad just got me into it, and I found it magical as a kid. You'd sow a little tiny seed, and then a few months later you got tomatoes. And so my big interest is I'm powered by taste and my belly, and I love food. I love eating food. So if I can grow my own, then you're on to a winner.
Without a doubt. 'Cause, I mean, it's what Chris and I are often chatting about. I love sweet corn, and homegrown sweet corn that you pick, and half an hour later it's on your table in front of you, ready to eat. Just tastes so different, doesn't it?
I go one step further. I really like raw sweet corn.
Okay.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, my word. Right.
You don't have to cook it. No. Just harvest the sweet corn, take a chomp out, and wow. It's like people think you have to cook asparagus. Fresh asparagus, it tastes so amazing. It's like a really strong kind of like pea flavour, garden pea flavour, mixed with asparagus. It's so refreshing. It's miles better than this grilled asparagus stuff that you get in restaurants.
Wow. Well, there we go, Chris. We've got something else to try.
Put that on my list.
I've had mini corn, the little baby mini corns that you get, and quite a lot of people use them in stir fries and things like that. I've eaten those raw quite a lot, but never tried a full-size sweet corn raw. I'll give that a go this summer. Thanks for that. Brilliant.
Yeah. That's right. Enjoy.
Yeah, so many of us still remember, the BBC comedy, The Good Life, which aired back in the 1970s. I remember when it was on first time, not showing my age, and it was obviously a hugely popular, situation comedy, which had everybody in the 1970s growing, fruit and veg, and as well as keeping chickens and goats and even pigs. Hugh, do you think it's the right time to reinvent The Good Life?
Well, I blamed my dad for getting me into gardening, and my dad blames the good life for getting him into it.
Oh, well. Perfect circle.
It is. I mean, yeah. I think the world is getting kind of more complex at the moment, and we just seem to be getting busier and busier. And I think having a garden and being able to grow your own food, or even just like create a space for just watching some pollinators, is just such a nice grounding thing that I think as society progresses, it's actually becoming more and more of a necessity, not just in terms of for like, nice calming and grounding, but in terms of keeping people sane. I think a lot of the issues that we have in modern society is because we've become so disconnected from nature that people don't really know how to people anymore, and they don't know what the seasons are. And if I was Prime Minister, I would force everyone to garden. And if they don't want to garden, well, they have to at least be able to cook with the produce that is grown, so people understand how nature works.
Yeah.
Good points, without a doubt. I mean, it's always good to get out in the garden, and if you're feeling a bit stressed, it relieves you a bit, doesn't it?
Maybe it's something they could put on.
Unless you've had a slug onslaught.
Well, goes with the territory, doesn't it?
That's it. And what do you think the sort of 3 most important rules are when it comes to growing your own food?
Just because you see Monty Don do it doesn't mean it's the best way. There's like over 100 ways to plant a potato, so just kind of like find the one that works for you. I think everyone always looks for like, what's the one thing or this and that, but it doesn't really exist. There's so much freedom and flexibility when it comes to gardening, so it's kind of going on a journey and making sure that you're not just working hard for the garden, but the garden's also working hard for you. So that's like the first thing.
Yep.
Second thing is, I have to say it, very sorry, but soil health is really important. You want a lot of organic matter in the soil. Now, I don't care whether you're a double digger or a no digger. The main thing is you just want lots of organic matter in the soil, because that fixes almost all of the problems. And then the third thing is, I don't know. I think the third thing is you want to, if you have a growing space, make it a space that kind of inspires you to go. So what you could do is, like, if you like having a barbecue like I do, then make a barbecue pit the kind of the central feature of the garden, or make like a little reading corner, or make like a little breakfast table, so you can have as many reasons to go out into your garden. And it's like that kind of ancient proverb of like what's like the most productive fertilizer to gardener's shadow. So the more time you can spend in the garden, the more time you can just enjoy it. I've seen that I need to re-tie up that bean sprout, so I'll just go and do that, and just turn it into your outside home. That's what I think.
That's some brilliant ideas. Thank you.
And actually, you've sparked a thought in my mind. I'm actually moving my vegetable garden closer to my house later on this year for that very reason, because it's at the far end of the garden. It's a bit of a journey to get there, especially when the weather's not particularly good.
It's like supermarkets putting milk in the back, so you have to walk all the way through. Your vegetable garden should be on your front door, matey.
It should indeed, and it will be. That's very true. Really good.
Good.
So, Hugh, who has been your horticultural hero, especially maybe about learning certain garden techniques?
My dad, to begin with.
Yeah.
I have to say that, obviously, but it is also true.
Yep.
And then I have many. When I was a kid, I had some, like Percy Thrower books, John Seymour books, and then more towards like my early teenage years, I'd say Charles Dowding, definitely. And now it's kind of like a big eclectic mix of people. But I will be honest, I actually spend very little time, well, almost no time at all, reading and watching gardening stuff now. It's more if I'm just researching for something, because I spend so much time in the garden and so much time doing stuff, I kind of want to do other things in life as well. Otherwise, I'll be 24/7 gardening related, which is, I have other interests as well. Can't fit everything in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Okay. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit about the background of your latest book, the Self-Sufficiency Garden, which was co-written with Sam Cooper? Feed Your Family and Save Money, and it's published by Doreen Kingsley. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of that?
Yeah, so Sam's a really good friend of mine. We've been working together for a few years now, and there were kind of two things that happened. One was a whole cost of living crisis, and also about people wanting to kind of, I think with what happened with COVID and seeing how weak our food supply chains were, and remembering what supermarket shelves look like, I think the two things came together as people looking for more food security, and people are looking for ways, if they can, to save money. And also, I think it was, honestly, like the amount of people that started gardening during COVID was fantastic. There's a lot of people who have continued, but like most of life, where people are like, oh, this is nice, we're so much more community-based and stuff. It then very quickly turned back into how it was. But we have gained some fantastic new growers into the community because of that. But what Sam and I were thinking was, one of the things I don't like is if I hear excuses or reasons to not try something, and I really want to help people as much as possible. My mission, I only have one mission. It's just to help as many people as possible grow their own food. And that can be in multiple different forms. But I thought, hey, why don't we look at doing a half-size allotment plot and just see how much food can be grown? Because it's like everyone's wanting to grow their own food, but I found it really hard to find kind of data of how much can be produced on an allotment, and obviously they're getting smaller as well, hence the half size. So we just thought, let's do a book that covers the growing side and also the kitchen side.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
And it works out really well. It's beautifully illustrated as well. I think the photography and the way you do the sort of step by steps, and you're acting as a perfect guide. I think it works incredibly well as a book there.
Thank you. I'll pay you later.
No, I really enjoyed reading. So many years ago, well, I think Peter was probably about 10 or 15 years ago, we had James Wong with us. He came to the garden centre.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good old James. He was promoted.
Oh, yeah. He was one of my other heroes back in the day.
Good, that's good answer. He was promoting his book on growing food and such like, and he gave a wonderful presentation here at the garden centre, and he actually suggested that the actual cost of growing your own food was quite high. And I think if memory serves me correctly, he worked out the cost when he built in the cost of the seed buying, implements, doing soil improvement, that a single cauliflower is going to cost over £20. There was a lot of gasps in the audience when that revelation came out. Does it all need to be edging on the pure economics to grow good food?
Well, like I said, he used to be one of my heroes.
Okay.
So no, I'm kidding. The work that he's done is amazing. Especially, I really enjoyed his book, Grow Your Own Drugs, as well. That kind of opened me up to it, not just having to be about vegetables. Yeah. But I don't. I could see how, especially if you go to garden centers and there's all of these. I think people get overwhelmed, and so they overbuy things that they actually need. And everything becomes so overcomplicated. £20 for a single cauliflower. I feel sorry that's what. I just don't know how anyone could spend that much growing a cauliflower. Basically, I'm actually at quite a loss. I don't know how to respond to that, because it just seems actually ridiculous. And I tracked all of my own data with the garden and looking at prices and comparing to both Aldi prices and Waitrose prices of what the equivalent was of what I grew. But on average, there's different ways of setting up a garden, and it can be very simple. But the simplest is making your own compost or getting some well-rotted manure and laying down some cardboard, putting the compost on top and planting into it and sowing. And £20 for a cauliflower. That must be a world record. I feel sorry for James though. If that's his experience of growing food, I think there's probably some ways where he could save some money. So I'd be more than happy to help him.
I think Huey was trying to explain that that's the thing, isn't it? When you build in all your time, and that included time as well. If you base that on a cost as well.
Well, he is well paid, isn't he? And equally, he's a Londoner, so
true.
At the end of the day, maybe his allotment costs 4 times the amount that ours do in the countryside.
It's probably like $500,000 a year, isn't it?
But, I mean, my viewpoint has always been I tend to try and grow vegetables that I think taste better than the ones that you can get in your supermarket, and B, are worthwhile growing. So I must admit, I don't grow onions and garlic because I can get them from the supermarket so cheaply. But things like a nice squash or a nice courgette, you can grow them so easily and get such a good crop out of. I mean, my allotment's £35 a year. Some seeds and some, like you say, Hugh, some compost, which essentially is just the stuff I've grown on the allotment the year before, is not expensive, is it? I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I've spent I've done a whole video about the economics of growing food based off time and equivalent and everything. And so on average, per square meter of growing space, I grew 8 kilos of edible food. This is after if you were not including the leaves and the roots and stuff. So it's an average of 8 kilos of food per square meter. Now, when you look at things like portions of vegetables for your 5 a day, a portion of veg is just 80 grams. And so you're effectively growing 100 portions of vegetables per square meter.
Yep.
And I was trying to work out an average value. It's hard because obviously you have things that are super cheap, but then you have things that are also quite expensive. Like you'd think, okay, yeah, salad is quite cheap, but I actually think salad is so expensive, especially those salad packs, considering how much you can grow in a square meter. But what I worked out, there are a few different things, and I would need to actually touch up on reviewing my data. But what I did work out is that I had an hourly salary. If I was quickly comparing to foods grown that you would buy from Aldi, if I was comparing to that, which is not fair, it's like comparing a Ferrari to a Fiat. But people, they like a comparison.
Yep.
My hourly salary was, for every hour I put into the garden, I got around £11 back, and obviously that was tax-free in the food equivalent. So, plus I got all of the benefits of being outside and enjoying life.
And you got some yummy vegetables to eat as well, which is even better.
Exactly.
Nice one.
So thinking about all the new veggie growing gardeners out there, which we know was quite a few, what do you think are the biggest mistakes people tend to make on their plots, perhaps in the first year or so?
Growing vegetables they're not actually interested in. And that's what I think. If you're and also, it's a simple one of just taking on too much. But what I say to people, if they're starting out, just pick just a few things that you're excited to try. Like, I want to harvest my first potato, or I want to have basil, or whatever it is. Just pick a handful and focus on those, because you're far more likely to be invested in looking after those. If you're not really interested in, because basically this is more of winning people over by stealth, but let them enjoy the things that they like and realize, wow, I shouldn't have grown a tomato, because now I've tasted homegrown tomatoes. It is so tasty. I'm going to be disappointed with any other tomato in my life, and I'm just going to have a life of disappointment unless I carry on growing tomatoes. But what that also means is thinking, oh, hey, in the past, I don't like beetroot or I don't like turnips, but I wonder if homegrown turnips taste better than shop turnips. And then you try it, and then you see, and then you realize, oh, I can actually harvest them when they're younger, or there are all these different varieties as well. But it's always baby steps. I think it's kind of easy to get an allotment and suddenly want to take over the world, but then that's how you can quickly lose motivation.
Yeah, that sounds very practical, and yeah, people taking too much on. I mean, if you're new to gardening anyway, it's all a bit bewildering to say the least, isn't it? From reading the seed packets,
especially in May. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, especially this month, indeed.
Definitely, and I think we're always learning things as well, aren't we? One of the things I love about gardening is that there's always something new to learn, and like you said, you can plant a seed or a potato 100 different ways, but it's learning those 100 different ways and finding out which one's best for you. It's a great hobby to have, without a doubt. And you're using raised beds in your veggie garden at the moment. What are your views on no-dig cultivation?
I think it's great. It works well. It's nice. I'm partial to a raised bed, to be honest with you. Obviously, it has a much deeper, extended conversation to have.
Yeah.
But the previous garden where I was at, which was, I took over my dad's kitchen garden for like 4 years. But those were raised beds with sides, and those were actually built on a place where there used to be a couple of sheds, a couple of outbuildings that had concrete bases back in the day. So if you dug down a couple of inches, you're hitting hard. You're not hitting soil.
Yeah.
So that's where you'd actually have to. Oh, it's fine. The good thing was it's on a slope.
Oh right. Okay. So the water drained away. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, but thinking about roots and stuff, so that's why you build up. I also like that I don't have to worry about edging. It's something I can sit on, and also for me it's also like a psychological thing. Sometimes if I am feeling a bit, there's lots to do, I can just easily focus on a single raised bed. I can treat it like it's its own garden. Tell you what, I've got an hour. Let me just focus on these 2 raised beds. I want to plant my potato crop and weed and clear this and get it prepped for whatever next. It just means that you can better segment your garden into individual projects. And I also quite like the aesthetics. So yeah, it's but I also do in-ground growing, and I have no dig beds that don't have sides, and it's I enjoy it all, really.
Fantastic. Good stuff.
And obviously, how do you sort of maximise and sort of help extend your growing season on your plot?
Succession planting is by far the most impactful way of increasing productivity, apart from soil health. And succession planting would also bring in undercover growing, because if you have a polytunnel, you can extend the start of your season and also the end. But it means that you can start off seedlings nice and early in February and March, that you can then be transplanting as almost semi-mature plants in late April into May. You then harvest those in June, July and August, but then in June you're kind of starting off the next batch of seedlings. So once something is harvested, you then put something else right in its place. So you can, in most of the garden, you can quite easily get at least 2 harvests over a growing season from the same patch of land. And that is what I do to try and get as much food over the growing season. So like when I harvest my new potatoes, I'll just plant my leeks, or I'll plant, or if it's something later on like main crop, I could then plant my spring cabbage. I never follow crop rotation. I haven't for many, many years. And that kind of builds in quite a big opportunity of freedom to decide, if these carrots are going to stay on a little bit more, well, then maybe I could just do my autumn sowing of carrots right after in the exact same bed. So yeah, just trying to keep it as flexible as possible.
Interesting. And my son and I are trying to grow padron peppers this year, and just because I wanted to try and plant the bug of gardening into his brain, and he's getting really involved in it. Have you got any other sort of easy to grow vegetables that you think people should start? Maybe a windowsill garden with their children. Anything that you can suggest?
I always say peas. Yeah, nothing is better than eating fresh peas straight from the pod. Like, that is just what an experience, and they're so easy, and you can harvest the pea shoots beforehand as well.
Good idea.
So yeah, I would always recommend peas. I'd also recommend, I don't know, there's different things. You could get quite funky with it. You could grow something like basil mint and then make pizza and put the basil mint on top of the pizza. And what happens during the cooking process is that the basil mint loses its minty flavor, but it retains the basil flavor. So then it's quite a fun experiment that kids can get involved with and enjoy, and use their sense of taste and aroma to see how that has happened. And it will have a positive association because they've got to eat pizza as well, so it's a win-win.
Definitely.
Brilliant. I like that.
And Hugh, on the whole area of climate change, obviously, has been talked about an awful lot. How do you think that's going to impact on the crops we grow today, and what new crops can we sort of envisage as growing if global warming continues at its current rate?
Oh gosh, so I think people are worrying too much about what crops to grow. Actually, I think it was. I also think things like people thinking coconut coir is sustainable is also ridiculous. What I would say is stop worrying about what should we be planting because of things might be getting warmer. For me, what I've experienced is that we're having more inconsistent weather patterns. So like April of last year, we had 22 frosts. So that's actually really cold. It was much colder than the April before. And so what we're actually dealing with is more irregular patterns as a result of what's going on. And so what it means is that you've kind of got to spread your egg, you've got to kind of spread it out a bit, not put all of your eggs into one basket. So just keep on growing things as you do. And as I said before, organic matter in the soil solves most of your problems. If it's too dry, well, organic matter can hold up to 10 times its weight in moisture. If it's too wet, then organic matter will help drain excess moisture out of the ground. That is really the only thing you need to be focused on if you're at all worried about warming temperatures for the most part. What I would say, because obviously people will then be, oh yes, but what about like the droughts and prolonged periods of dry weather? Again, I mean, I live, well, not where I live, but the garden, it's completely off grid. I don't have mains water, so I have to just deal with a pond and a stream, which when we haven't had rain for quite a while, dries out. But it doesn't ever make me just because, okay, I'll just have to adapt. I'll just do some mulching instead, or I'll just be a little bit more clever with my watering. I'll do more set up more soaker hoses or more appropriate infrastructure for highly efficient watering. But I will never let a change in climate put me off growing something that I like growing. I would also recommend perennials because perennials tend to be more resilient. They create stronger root systems. But again, I also feel like, okay, this last winter we've had has been quite mild and it's been incredibly wet. So there were some perennials that I planted which are, okay, well, these are great because these are, hardy and stuff. But because it's so wet, they just rot in the ground. So there's no right answer. It's just understanding the basic principles and not becoming defeatist about it, and just looking at opportunities of what things can I do that contribute to the garden, like my watering infrastructure, can I do to help make the main garden more resilient. So instead of worrying about what to grow, it's more worrying about how to approach your growing.
And just to clarify, you mentioned the word perennials. We're talking here about what, soft fruits, plants which stay in the soil for what, 3 or 4 years onwards, sort of long-term cropping plants?
Yeah, anything that grows for like more. You have short-lived perennials, which are like 3 years, but anything 3 years or more, like if you're growing blackcurrants and gooseberries, they'll usually grow for more than 20 years. But then you can grow things like I grow a perennial kale. It's a variegated version, which is really beautiful, called Dorberton's kale, and that just grows really well. It's really tasty, and you can take stem cuttings from it, from the shoots, so you can just really easily make more. And and so there's a huge category of different perennial things, and you've got perennial versions of things like I'm growing something called mashua, which is perennial nasturtium, which creates edible leaves and little flowers very similar to nasturtium, but it also provides you with a tuber crop to eat as well.
I've not heard of that one. I have to look that one up. That's brilliant. Thanks. And there's a lot of chat at the moment about sort of soil fertility and healthy soils and mycorrhizal fungi, and just sort of making sure that the soil is really looked after rather than feeding plants really high nitrogen foods or what have you all the time. What are your thoughts on this, and how would you go about improving the soil?
Oh, well, I would recommend watching a video that I've done recently called The Practical Guide to Soil Health.
Yeah, that's a good
where I cover
watch.
It in detail.
Excellent.
But as I said in that video, it's so easy to get caught up in thinking, oh, what about these little tiny things that I can't see with my own eye, like bacteria and nematodes and all of these things. It's like you don't actually need to know about that at all. All your job is as a gardener is to facilitate the right environment to just let soil microbes do its thing. You kind of gardeners should see themselves as shepherds of the soil, just kind of tending from afar, taking care, but not controlling absolutely everything that goes on. Soil science is more complicated than rocket science. We've got people, out into space, but every single year, soil scientists are still finding out huge things that we never knew before about how even fungi work and loads of new species. And a lot of it is very kind of, they think, okay, we know that there are these associations, but we just assume this is what happens because it's so hard to compute. So, rocket science is easy in comparison to soil science. And I feel that gardeners are kind of getting sucked into that, and we're kind of, and it's overwhelming gardeners. And I've seen it, and I know this because I've been caught in this net. I'm looking at my bookshelf now, and I have all of these different books that I bought about microbiology and stuff. And I just realized you don't need to know any of it. All you need to know is that provided that you're adding at least 1 inch to 2 inches, so 2 to 5 centimeters of good quality organic matter, you're not leaving the soil bare for long periods of time, and you're just disturbing it as least as practically possible. That is all you need to do to have a healthy soil. And it's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. And as far as compost making, Hugh, on your allotment, are you do you do all your composting cold method, or do you use the sort of hot bin solution? Which is your preferred option?
Chickens is my preferred option of making compost. Yeah,
that was on my list. Okay,
makes very rich, good quality compost, doesn't it? A bit of chicken manure.
Well, you actually put all of your compost material in with the chickens, and you use their natural function of pecking and scratching, and you can make really good quality compost that isn't actually too rich, but it gives the chickens a wonderful opportunity because you have very happy hens that are scratching about when they get lots of wood chip and all of the brassica leaves and stuff, and it saves you a job having to, turn it or things like that. So my favorite is chickens. I have just finished building my dream chicken composting setup. It's called Fort Clux, and and I am a prison warden. But yeah, Fort Clux, it is a lovely enclosure where part of it is going to be planted up with almost like a forage forest for the chickens to enjoy, and then the other half is using a gentle slope of gravity, putting material in at one end, turning it downhill to the bottom where it'll then be finished compost. It then continues downhill onto the raised bed. So that's kind of like the main one is chickens. And then I do hotbeds. So hotbeds is like creating hot compost, but you get to utilize the heat in multiple ways and grow really early crops out of season and before all the pests become an issue. And I also like cold composting as well. However, cold composting is very bad because it releases a little bit of methane. So shame on anyone who cold composts. I'm joking, by the way, but people have told me off for cold composting because of methane emissions, and I just tell them to get a grip.
Well, that's what happens in nature, isn't it? The leaves and things that come off the trees and fall to the ground and get composted away naturally.
And when we talk about methane, we often talk about cows because obviously they produce an awful lot of natural methane, don't they? So quite a few.
Yeah, but that's complicated.
Yeah,
because that's biogenic methane, and you've got to take into account the carbon sequestering of the grass, provided it's a grass-based system. And it's actually cow burps. Everyone says it's cow farts, but it's not. It's the cow burps that is what is the methane side. But my thing is, if people are, because I did have it was another podcast and they were pressing me about like, oh, gardening is, because there was a recent article, I think it was in the Telegraph or something, about gardening being like growing your own food is more emits more emissions than industrial farming and stuff. And I think the issue is as well is that people are very much headline readers and don't actually read the context. And I think social media has made things quite surface level, but I think as a result that the spillover that happens in the garden is people tend to believe one thing that they see as like take it as gospel. Then also there'll be something where they're not kind of they try out themselves and realize, oh, it's so much simpler than I thought, because I thought I had to know all of these things, but really I only needed to know one thing, which is why I don't know. There was a funny story of a person who is a soil scientist, and she was asking me if I was interested in making compost batches for specific plants, like a compost for leeks, and a compost for radish, and a compost for potatoes. And I was like, I don't have the time or the materials to do that, or the interest. And she was absolutely shocked that I wasn't interested in that. I was like, because she's never grown food herself, so she doesn't understand the practicality and the effort that goes into making it. For me, it's like you can make one good compost and basically grow everything in that compost. When it comes to seed sowing, I never use seed compost. I start off all of my seeds, whether they're peppers or squash or radish, and just heat-free multi-purpose compost. That is how I do all of my seed sowing. It's so simpler than is often said, and that's what I try and get across in my videos, is that gardening can be simple.
I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And now Chris introduced me to comfrey tea a couple of years ago. Kindly gave me a couple of plants, and obviously I'd not really come across natural not come across natural fertilizers before. What are your thoughts on liquid feeds and go-to fertilizers? And are you making your own, or?
Yeah. I actually a couple of weeks ago I set off my first batch of. It's like a mix, so nettle and comfrey tea.
Okay.
That works really well as a really good multi-purpose tea. I think it's good because sometimes compost is expensive, or you might be waiting on your compost to finish, and plants sometimes do need a little help, a little extra nutrition. So just creating your own in the form of a liquid feed is a nice, simple way of doing that. I don't care that it's anaerobic. I don't, you can do things like compost teas and stuff, but I just do the stinkier the better, in my opinion.
Definitely.
But then there's also other things. There's also other things that you can do, like Korean natural farming methods, where you can quite easily produce really high concentrations of native microbes, native bacteria that you can then water onto your beds and apply a really high quality micro collection of microorganisms that can help, because for plants to access most nutrients, they need to go through biology to be made plant available. And very often the issue is that you could have the nutrients in the ground, but you don't have the biology making it plant available. And so doing something like making a compost tea where it naturally decomposes because of that process, it's gone through biology, then you can make it, then those are going to be plant available. And it's the same when you're composting. But adding microbes, the one thing I would recommend if people are wanting to get started is to look at a Jadam microbial solution, where you use leaf molds and kind of almost like mashed potatoes, which is the starch that feeds the microbes. And you do this in a bucket of water, and then it bubbles, and then you dilute it 1 to 10, and you water that over your garden, and that works really well.
Gosh, that's a new one. Yeah,
brilliant. Have you got that on any of your videos?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. That's where we can look for that.
Yeah. I'll send you a link after.
Lovely.
Brilliant. Thanks.
And Hugh, as garden and growing space becomes ever so precious, how best can we maximise our boundaries and vertical spaces in our gardens with growing in mind, food growing in mind?
That's a great question. I think that, so my big interest is permaculture. That is what I define myself as a permaculturalist, but more of the traditional sense, not the hippie sense. And permaculture is looking at ways, it's a design toolkit, and it's an approach of looking at, inspired by natural patterns, how we can make the most efficient spaces and systems. And one of the big things in permaculture is something called the edge effect. And if you see it in nature, the boundary between two ecosystems is where you get the greatest concentration of biodiversity. So like the boundary between a woodland and a meadow, that meeting that boundary is where you get the most rich biodiversity. And I love within my spaces, I want to have as much biodiversity as possible in my garden. So I would look at multiple things when it comes to boundaries, but one of the things is I see beneficial insects as my own private army, helping to protect my plants from pests. So I will always make sure that I'm using boundaries to help welcome them into the garden, but also to give them a bit of a safe haven. The other thing with vertical, of course, is, if you've got limited space, then grow all of your tall things. You can either do it two ways. You can grow all of your tall things up against your boundaries, like the sunny boundaries. Or if you're actually in quite an exposed space, you can use vertical structures within your garden or within your beds to create pockets of shade where you could then plant your salads in behind, so they don't prematurely run to seed over summer. And then on your north-facing boundaries, that's why I'd recommend you put your tool storage and your compost bins and your water storage, because that doesn't get nearly as much sun. So that's a good way of prioritizing where your food grows. I wish there were more tasty vegetables that grew vertically outside, because you're kind of sometimes like you could do lots of peas and that's fine, and you have got runner beans, but I'm not the world's biggest fan of runner beans. I'll have a few, but I'll only eat more if there's lots of cheese and garlic to go with them. So I would also look at things like fruit, or being clever with training kind of trailing winter squashes, but you can train them upwards on trellises, and you can have like amazing pumpkins and winter squash displays growing vertically as well. So yeah, there's lots of different ways you can approach it.
Yeah, I remember when we grew some courgettes up as some trellis work here, and that was fun. It made it picking a lot easier.
It keeps the slugs off them as well, doesn't it, I suppose?
Yeah.
I can't remember which variety that was. It was a weird Italian one, wasn't it? The sort of seed-shaped things.
Yes.
Anyway, so Hugh, obviously space is always an issue, as I think we all know with gardening, but what are your favourite jobs in the vegetable garden, and what are your least favourite?
My least favourite job is that's tricky actually. I thought an answer was just going to come to me, because I could say weeding, but I do find that very satisfying.
Looks good when you've got a nice patch cleared.
Yeah. I think my least favourite is just having to tidy up after myself, to be honest. I'm a bit of I get very distracted, so I'll be doing something and then I'm like, ooh, what's this? And then I forget that. And then I have to come back after myself and try and pick up all the tools and pots that are just absolutely everywhere. So that's my least favourite job. And then I'd say my most favourite is transplanting. I just love transplanting.
Interesting. Is when you're getting little seedlings and putting them into the soil, or are you thinking more any transplanting?
I mean, I love, transplanting or planting out or whatever, whether it's an apple tree or I'm going to be planting out my tomatoes in the polytunnel later this week, and just anything where it's putting a seedling or a seed or a plant into its final growing, into its final resting space.
Yeah.
I just love it. I love having a blank bed, and then 10 minutes later it's filled with lots of little plants.
Yeah, that's very, very satisfying, isn't it? It's the completion, isn't it? And seeing that part of the cycle going.
It's basically the opposite of weeding. You do the weeding to get that nice, lovely bank part, and then you have the transplanting. So,
indeed, yes, counterproductive. We're coming to the end of the podcast, but we do like to ask you a couple of interesting questions. Well, we hope they're interesting. You've been shipwrecked on a desert island. Which plant or tool would you wish that you could have so you could enjoy your life on your virtual island retreat?
So, I'm very sorry, but is there anything else on this island?
A few palm trees for shade. So you might have some coconuts if you're lucky, but you imagine it, and that's where it is.
Yeah. So, look, if I was shipwrecked on an island, I think, I don't know, I'm kind of a bit of a caveman sometimes, so just having a good pocket knife, I don't know whether that's kind of cheating because that has multiple tools on it.
No.
But yeah, a good pocket knife. And if I was to pick a plant, pretending that things didn't exist.
It's got multi-temperatures, this island. You can have cool areas and hot areas, so you can grow whatever you like.
Oh, right. I don't know. I think I'd maybe try I tried something different. I tried to do like some kind of like sand garden or something.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good answer. Nice one. And finally, Hugh, we normally ask our guests for an amusing plant or garden-related story. Have you got anything you can share with us?
It's kind of garden related because it's to do with chickens.
Okay.
If that's allowed.
Yeah, of course.
It's not really related to me, but my parents have neighbours, and my neighbours have a holiday cottage, and people come and stay. And my neighbours have chickens in a little garden, and what they do is, if people, this is over 12 years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. And my neighbour said, he never believe it. I was like, what? We had some guests, and I told them to go and collect the eggs from the chickens, and they seemed very excited. And then 10 minutes later, they're knocking on my front door holding the eggs, and they said, I can't believe it. And she was like, what? He said, and the people said, they were in their 40s, they said, well, I thought the chicken laid the yolk and the white, and then the farmer put it in the egg. I didn't realise the chickens laid the shell as well. So there we go.
Well,
wow.
Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. Now I can understand your comments about how it's important people should see sort of plants growing and then vegetables appearing and then learning how to use them. Definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Great story.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your chat today. How do our Dig It followers learn more about your vegetable growing, and how do they get hold of a copy of your book?
Yeah, you can just find me, just search Hugh Richards, HUW, on Instagram or YouTube. And my book is in Waterstones, on Amazon, wherever, really.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
That's
Great
really
stuff,
good.
yeah, because there's quite a few videos you've managed to post now, isn't there? It's great.
A few hundred, yeah.
It's a good resource, and there's some great tips on there. So
Thank you.
Have a look at those if you've not come across them yet.
Yeah, and we'll make sure there's plenty of links on the show notes, Hugh. So there'll be plenty of content for our listeners to look at and enjoy and learn from. And thank you once again for your time today. It's been absolutely fascinating. We've really enjoyed your company.
You're most welcome. I hope you guys have a lovely May.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
indeed. Yeah, thank you very much.
As well. Thanks, Hugh. Good to speak to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Today's show was brought to you by Buckingham Garden Centre and Nurseries. The show was hosted by Chris Day and Peter Brown. The show was produced by Peter Brown. And our thanks to Chiltern Music Therapy for providing the music. Thanks for listening.
At Chiltern Music Therapy, we want everyone to know the difference that music can make in their lives. From parents and their premature babies in hospital to grandparents with dementia. We provide music therapy and community music services to people of all ages and needs across England. We work both digitally and in person in people's homes, care homes, schools, hospitals and hospices. Find out more at chilternmusictherapy.co.uk.